Now, we're focusing on this crisis, and we'll be live to the Prime Minister shortly. That is the main game. This is the issue that the nation's dealing with. But for political observers, journalists, commentators, the timing of Malcolm Turnbull's book, it'll be criticised by some as narcissistic and putting out his memoir at the time of national crisis. Maybe you should hold off on that. But as someone who observes politics, it's interesting to see some of the dynamic and the lack of warmth between him and, well, let's look at Kevin Rudd, other individuals in the Liberal Party. I mean, it's quite extraordinary what he's written about in this book.
Yeah, it is. And the political junkies who watch Sky News will be, whether they hate Malcolm Turnbull or like him, they'll be reading this book, rushing out to buy it, I'm sure. I mean, we've had some leaks today from the book, as has been reported on Sky News, and The Australian got some leaks. 9 newspapers were going to serialise it this weekend, I think. And many in government believed, Kieran, that Malcolm Turnbull would use this book to square up with the likes of Peter Dutton or even Scott Morrison. And while there are criticisms of both those figures in the book, the biggest bullets, in my view, are reserved for his former close ally, Mathias Cormann, who, of course, moved from him to Peter Dutton in the leadership contest in 2018. So he's really done a bit of a number on Mathias Cormann here by saying that Cormann had a low opinion of Scott Morrison. I've contacted Mr Cormann and he's declined to comment. Privately, I understand he's saying some of the claims in here are just untrue. Turnbull said he had a message from Cormann at one point where he said, I think we have a treasurer problem, and claimed Cormann wanted to keep Scott Morrison out of discussions when he was treasurer on financial matters because he was leaking too much. Let's have a look at some of the things he's reported to have said in the book and reports in the Australian and other media this morning. On Mathias Cormann and his relationship with Morrison, he wrote, Mathias regarded Scott as emotional, narcissistic and untrustworthy and told me so regularly, Mr Turnbull claims. Of course, if Mathias had a poor opinion of Scott, Dutton's dislike of him was even stronger. And then he says, Mathias and I were at our wits' end as how to manage Scott. As Mathias said, we have a treasurer problem, and the problem was one of trust. Well, if you want to know why, what this does in effect, Malcolm Turnbull has done, Kieran, is he's splitting or attempting to split, it seems, Mathias Cormann and Scott Morrison as they're currently in their jobs. It's not going to be helpful for Mathias Cormann, is it? I mean, Turnbull will say, look, I'm just writing the truth. But if you want to know why Malcolm Turnbull's down on Mathias Cormann, I'll just take you down memory lane here. Let's listen to this press conference where he pulled his support from Malcolm Turnbull before the leadership vote in 2018.
I believe that Malcolm Turnbull has been and is a great Prime Minister. But I can't ignore the fact that a majority of colleagues in the Liberal party room are of the view that there should be a change.
Right, so remember he said he was a fantastic Prime Minister, but he had to help axe him. So that's why Malcolm Turnbull's dirty at him. And on Josh Frydenberg, let's have a look at that. Malcolm Turnbull says of him, he wears his ambition and his prime ministerial destiny on his sleeve. But unlike many others, his ambition is matched by an extraordinary work ethic. Well, hard to argue with that. You can see Frydenberg's work ethic from the number of his media appearances. He does work very hard. The pair worked closely together on the later dumped National Energy Guarantee when he was Energy Minister, of course. But, gee, Josh Frydenberg seems to have escaped a bit compared to his colleagues there. Now, I mean, he does have a bit... some very unflattering things to say about Scott Morrison. Let's have a look. He says he was talking about his role in leadership coups, Scott Morrison. He's claiming that Scott Morrison would promise his support to the leader but have his backers back someone else. He says Morrison was playing a double game, professing public loyalty to me while at the same time allowing his supporters to undermine me. It was, of course, precisely what he'd done in 2015 when he said he'd voted for Abbott in the leadership ballot but worked closely with me to ensure his supporters voted against Abbott. I mean, he actually reveals in here he always saw Scott Morrison as his natural successor, by the way. And then there was this on Scott Morrison. He said, Mathias and I agreed we had to make sure Scott was a success. We had to recognise he was brittle emotionally and easily offended. Gee. At a practical level, we both sought to ensure as tactfully as possible that he stayed out of negotiations with the Senate. He had a blustering manner that could easily be mistaken for bullying and was often counterproductive. Not very nice words there from Malcolm Turnbull. Look, it's been reported too that Malcolm Turnbull was claimed in this book, rather sensationally, Kieran, that he helped set up The Guardian in Australia, which is really quite extraordinary when the publication's editorial stance, both in Britain and here, is typically left of the Labor Party, frankly. Certainly when he was Prime Minister, senior ministers did express concern that Malcolm Turnbull was paying too much attention to what The Guardian was reporting. And then, of course, there was his recording of Kevin Rudd's message to him, Malcolm Turnbull, when Turnbull failed to back him for UN Secretary-General. Now, I won't swear here, Kieran, but I'll say he said, "You piece of, let's just say, manure, I'm going to get you for this." This is what Rudd said to have told Turnbull. "I'm going to come down to Australia and campaign against you in every part of the country. I will remind them of Godwin effing Gresh, you so-and-so." Good to have a bit of levity from the issue of coronavirus, Kieran. Now, look, I just want to say I've got some information about the presser that's coming from Scott Morrison. I was laughing a lot this morning at it as well. Sorry about that. But come on, we've got to keep it straight here.